Well, John, I'm going to take this minute before we officially get to our start time to just say this is Anthony, the real Anthony, for those of you who've been trying to figure out which one of us is which today. I just want to say thank you so much to Sarah Somsky, who has put a huge part of today together and just became our Quad City Senior Engineer of the Year last night at the Quad City Engineering and Science Council banquet. So kudos to her for all of her efforts on this. There's a lot of other people on the team that have done some really great stuff putting this all together today too, including your hosts from the different tracks like John here. So I have been hiding and not helping out too much this year, but really appreciate everybody keeping this going. I think we had a record turnout again this year. We've raised a lot of money for scholarships. We've trained a lot of engineers in our region, and hopefully have educated each other all a bunch today and made the Quad Cities a little bit better place than it was when we started this morning. So happy Engineers Week. And I will introduce our last speakers for the day here. So again, we've got two professional engineers speaking to us today. Rob Davis brings over 30 years of professional civil engineering experience to his position as the Cedar Rapids Flood Control Program Manager. He began his career with the City of Cedar Rapids in 1998, overseeing some of the city's largest infrastructure projects, including roads, bridges, stormwater and sanitary sewer management projects. After the flood of 2008 damaged more than 1,000 city blocks, more than 300 public buildings, Davis managed flood damage assessments and the reconstruction and mitigation of city facilities from future floods. He has served in his current role for the past 6 years, where he leads the planning, design, and construction of the $750 million permanent flood control project for both sides of the Cedar River. Davis is a licensed professional engineer in Iowa and holds an Envision Sustainability Professional accreditation. He earned a Master of Business Administration from Rutgers University, a Master of Science in Civil Engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Penn State University. Mike received his Bachelor of Science from the University of Iowa. He is a project manager at HDR Engineering Incorporated with more than 12 years of project management, design, and construction experience of major arterials, dense urban corridors, and local roadways. He specializes in complex municipal projects that are LPA-led with state or federal funding that require coordination and permitting from regulatory agencies. So, welcome, Rob Davis and Mike Keurig, to our final presentation today. We really appreciate you guys being here and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to turn my camera on. Let me know if the bandwidth is a problem and I can turn it back off. First off, I also want to thank you all. It's Engineers Week. It's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. We as engineers don't get a lot of praise. Our public works director likes to say ours is a noble profession, and I agree. And I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for all the things that you do, because at times it is a thankless profession. I know a lot of you work on the City of Cedar Rapids project. So again, thank you. Happy Engineers Week to all of you. And I've already got my Friday afternoon present. About 3 o'clock this afternoon, the City of Cedar Rapids lifted this mask mandate, which has been in place ever since we came back in the office last year. So things are looking up in lots of ways. Maybe not this picture on your screen. This is some photos we wanted just to give you the sense of 2008. Many of you have probably seen these before, but this is a 31-foot river crest on the Cedar River, 143,300 cubic feet per second. We're probably well below 10,000 cubic feet per second today. This project, or this disaster, cost $5.4 billion in damages. At the time, it was FEMA's 5th largest public disaster project. Unfortunately, it was been surpassed numerous times since then, but 10,000 residents were displaced, 5,390 homes were affected, 10 square miles of the city. All in all, it was about 13% of the city was underwater. And looking at the numbers, the minor flood stages river gauge 12, moderate 14, major 16, and we had hit 20 was our record in 100, well, about 100 years of records. And then comes along a flood that's 11.12 feet above that. So um, go figure, you think it might be a tenth or two here, but much like some of the other presentations we heard today, it was kind of a perfect storm. We had a wet fall and then the no snowfall for the winter. 2008 was about double its normal. Uh, uh, and then we had rainfall on the in the watershed, and every time the crest moved down, it would rain on top of that crest, and that was kind of the perfect storm. If you want to go to the next store or next slide, Mike. Just some other photos here. I think I mentioned in that update there, 1,000 blocks of the city, 300 public buildings, 900 businesses. The kind of ripples in the river there, that's the railings on the First, Second, and Third Avenue bridges. That was our city hall right in the middle of the island there, or in the middle of the river. And then there's also the county courthouse and the county jail on the right side of the screen in the middle of the river. So, just still hard to look at these photos and just imagine how much water there was. Next slide, please. Here's another one kind of looking from south to north. Our Central Fire, Police Station, City Hall, County Courthouse, all the county administrators' offices, federal courthouse as well, county jail, all required immediate relocation. And then the area that we're going to be talking about today is just at the top of the screen. Some other photos. This is our wastewater pollution control plant. So obviously that was taken offline. We have 43 vertical wells, all but one of them were offline as the motors were inundated. Next slide, Mike. So I want to talk just kind of the resiliency here. The picture on the left is June 2008. So we're going to kind of walk you through those. September 2016, we had our second highest flood of record. That was 21.97 feet. So it eclipsed our previous record before 2008 by almost 2 feet, but it was still 9 foot below the record flood. And what's interesting about that one, this was kind of the opposite. There was 12 inches of rain in the upper Cedar River watershed, and then that was it. And then the water came down, but there was no rain on top of that. It was a much drier year. So the forecasts of river stage were around 25, but it actually was several feet less, which was fortunate for us because we don't have a flood system in place like is planned for the bottom section there, which is what we're working on with the Army Corps of Engineers. That's the $750 million project. You can go to the next slide, Mike. This is the flood control system. We'll be talking mostly about the area in the red box there, the Cedar Lake area, the north tie off on the east side of the river. But I'll just walk you through this. The Army Corps project, which we work on with them, is both it's that whole east side. It starts at where that red box is at Interstate 380, and then it runs down the Cedar River by the Cargill plant or by the Quaker Oats plant where the cursor is, Interstate 380, through the core of downtown Cedar Rapids, and then it kind of winds its way downstream past all the bridges, and then there's a Cargill corn facility at the south end there, and it ties into high ground. The legend is blue is a permanent flood wall where the real estate is restricted. The magenta or purple color is the levees. So I think our widest levee footprint is about 130 foot base and it's about 23 foot high. That's in the Sinclair area. In the downtown section where we have limited real estate, but we didn't want to be careful not to wall off the river where there's a lot of activity on the river. I mean, it's one thing to have a permanent wall around Quaker and Cargill, but downtown area, we will be going with a knee wall and then removables above that. And then I would say we started the system off with 30 gates I'm sorry, 35 gates on the railroad, and the roads, and we are down to 20 on our system. We look to remove one more with some up and over to get down to 19. So we continue to work to try to make this system uh, more resilient and easy to operate. We have about 48 hours notice with the size of the watershed to implement this system. When we started this, we had about 20% removable, and that seemed a little untenable. We worked with the Army Corps' facility in Vicksburg, Mississippi, the Engineering Research Center, to do a time and motion study. And we've settled on, again, 48 hours, the 95% um, percent everything that can be done in that time period. Obviously, we will make sure it all gets done, but we did want to have that factor of safety there that, bad weather, untrained folks, et cetera, new contractors. So we'll practice it, but that's the plan, 48 hours. And so we're down to about 12.5% removables, which is still quite a bit. We have not seen any other system that's going to be this aggressive in having as many gates and parts and stop log gates. And again, 19 gates is still a lot. And we've got about 5,200 feet of removable parts. Um, not 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 to mention, we got the west side here, which is on the bottom side of the screen there. That is not an Army Corps project. That is a city-only project. Both sides are about 3.75 miles, and those yellow areas that are shown, those are detention basins. Those will work in conjunction with the pump stations. We got 11 pump stations. We're actually finding the pump stations to be the most expensive part of the system. We may be a little bit gun shy, but getting 5 inches of rain in 2008 on top of the river crest, uh, we have adopted a different standard than the Army Corps of Engineers. We are going with a 5-year storm for our pump stations versus the 3-month standard. So that does add quite a bit of resiliency, but quite a bit of extra cost for the city. But having gone through that, we want to make sure we don't flood from interior rainfall as well. And so that's the flood control system. The other main component, if you could point out the 8th Avenue Bridge, Mike, um, we want to be able to get across we were building a new $50 million bridge over the top of the flood control system. Since we have so many moving parts, the other main team that I lead is the 8th Avenue Bridge team. We will be constructing a cable stayed bridge on a curve. So it's going to be very unique, but you can see it's actually at one of the narrowest parts of the river. So we're trying to keep the hydraulic profile down. And because of that, we were forced into a specialty bridge, which is fine. It's going to be extremely iconic because you don't see cities owning cable supported bridges, and on top of that, it's a curved bridge. But let's start talking a little bit about that area by the Cedar Lake. I want to give you kind of an impression of what we're dealing with here. The original alignment that the Army Corps of Engineers had back in their 2011 report came around the Quaker plant and then tied into Interstate 380 just over by St. Luke's Hospital, where that purple line is. The city had a locally preferred plan that we pitched the Army Corps. It was one of their concepts, but from a benefit cost ratio, this was what was approved in the 2014 WRDA bill. However, I mentioned that there's a West Side system. At the time that this was the chief's report was signed in 2011, the the West Side system wasn't there, so the river rise to the west side with the East Side system was about 3/10 of a foot. However, when you put in the West Side system, now the river rise goes from 3/10 of a foot to 3.5 feet in that 2008 flood volume, which is the design storm. Well, because of that, that whole area, Cedar Lake and the properties that surround it, 86 properties would have taken more water than they took in 2008 because of the existence of the system downstream. Uh, so that's a problem. Additionally, the Cedar Lake is a a very important asset to the City of Cedar Rapids community that desires to turn that into something similar to, I'll say, Grays Lake in Des Moines, if you're familiar with that. The Iowa DNR was very excited when the city extended the project around Cedar Lake to protect those other 86 properties. Now that really only leaves us a handful of properties on the upstream side of the McLeod Run, if you could point that out, Mike. So the line of protection doesn't cross that major stream there. So we have a few properties up there, and our water treatment plant is right there. You can kind of see some of the clarifiers right there. So we now, instead of getting down from like 90 unprotected properties, we're down to about 4, and we'll do some ring levees over there. So that was the original plan. Like you said, you saw the slide a couple ago that showed the locally preferred plan, which we are constructing with the Army Corps. And so that really wasn't that hard to have that switched since it had been looked at previously. It just adds a little extra cost to the city's cost share because the Army Corps is sharing in the cost to go around McLeod Run and Cedar Lake, but only to the length that's shown on that purple line. You want to go to the next slide, Mike? So this is kind of what we're doing. I just wanted to show you this area. When we look at developing a flood control project, I think I said to you before, I really appreciate everything all the engineers do, and we are taken for granted. The City of Cedar Rapids doesn't really think about much of what the city's flood control division does. They just expect it to work. What they're really interested in is how is Cedar Lake going to operate? Where, what new animals are down there? What's the, boardwalk going to look like? How can we, redevelop this area? How can the bikes be better? How can we fish? Things like that. So the expectations are pretty high on us. We're just expecting, like when you turn the water faucet down, water comes out, right? This is not looking like an amenity with a huge Union Pacific rail yard there, an industry on the foreground, and you can see there's also some industry. There's a Cargill bean plant, and you can see some of the steam coming up from there. So, not a very attractive area to turn into amenity with a flood control project. Next slide. It only gets better, right, Mike? Here again, you can actually see the transformers at the Alliant yard sitting there. But there's the Cedar River to the right and the Cedar Lake to the left, and the railroad yard right down the middle. Next slide. We've had some challenges with bicycle. We've seen some of the other ones. If you were on the Minot presentation, they showed the bike trail there. Well, we try to add those things, and then you're trying to retrofit them in, there's actually more than a 90-degree bend on the existing trail here in that red line, and try to get the bikes on a 3.5 to 4 foot wide sidewalk. That really doesn't work very well. Plus, I don't know of any bicyclists who can turn a 90-degree bend like that. So that's not good. And that bike trail has about 2,500 we counted users on a nice weekend day. So it's a pretty busy trail. Next slide. This one is, I laugh at this. The Los Angeles River is what I call this. It's just a paved concrete channel for McLeod Run. Could we have made this any more utilitarian? And you can see it just, fills up with gravel. Upstream of this on McLeod Run, uh, it's an impaired stream, but it is stocked with trout, and it's a trout fishing stream. So it's the state's only urban trout stream, and then it just kind of morphs into a concrete channel. So people want want that activity of fishing, but this is what we gave them. Next slide. This is Shaver Road. This is that international paper. When they're at their loading dock, their vehicles actually, the cabs actually sent out in the road. These are the things that, again, the public will notice, not the flood control system, but here's another opportunity for something we can improve. Want to go to the next slide, Mike? So this is the flood inundation area. You can see that the flood totally overwhelms the Cedar Lake. The Iowa DNR lake restoration folks are interested in improving the lake, but not until it's protected from flooding. So their thought would be, getting some inundation in there. You don't maybe think about the lake being damaged, but that needs probably 10 to $15 million of dredging to get muck out of there. It was an old kind of cooling area for the Alliant Energy power plant. So that needs to be protected before Iowa DNR will step in and help to clean that up, because they are concerned about the investment being taken out with a major flood. And then you can see on this map also why protecting the west side was so important. If you go back real quickly, it's just a big area that's inundated, as much on the west side as on the east side. Next slide, Mike. This one here is up along McLeod Run. The different colors just show the area inundation. We are going to the 2008 flood, which is above the 500-year storm. Even with the revised FEMA maps, we would see that to be about maybe about 750-year flood. Is between the 500 and 1,000. And it's important. Shaver Road is inundated, clearly inundated at the design event, but it's a truck route and it's only one way in, one way out. So it's important to raise that. And you can see the water plant is underwater. The only area that would actually be dry would be just a small part of the yard of that Schimberg company. And that whole south area on the bottom of the screen is also underwater. It was just drawn to the point where the flood wall will go. If you want to go to the next slide there, Mike. We're going to talk about, kind of the importance of the goals of the project. Safety, obviously, flood control system has to work. We are trying to get to the point. We were looking at a presentation earlier today in Kansas City, and I think their fourth rise. We're trying to maybe go right for the gold standard and go to the 2008 flood, which, like I said, was 11.12 feet over our previous flood record. It was also in the a previous study of the probable maximum flood. So it's safety. The next one is economic development. Like I mentioned, truck routes. We've got to be able to keep our economy moving. Even in 2016, when we sustained very little damage with the second highest flood and the HESCO barriers, there were businesses that were teetering on bankruptcy just for being evacuated for 2 weeks. So the idea of having permanent flood control that businesses can be behind is extremely important. And then, like I mentioned, the community amenities. The idea behind this flood control system is to hide it in plain sight. We've been referred to as Disney Imagineers. We want the public to see the other components of the flood control system, which are the skate parks, which are the kayak launches. We're actually looking at a whitewater course through the dam, the improvements to Cedar Lake, the fishing streams, the things like that. And oh, by the way, it happens to protect the City of Cedar Rapids water control plant, or water treatment plant, and the wastewater plant. They don't have to, the public doesn't have to know that, but that's the things that we engineers do every day. I'm going to turn this over to you, Mike, now. You can kind of go through some of the details in this McLeod Run area.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. So as Rob mentioned, there's a basic function, right? Flood system has to work. So here's just a rough idea of what we're implementing, right? We've got flood walls, levees, and a pump station here by Cedar Lake. But what we're really trying to create is those amenities to create basically a flood system without it looking and feeling like a flood system. So we're implementing ADA compliant fishing trails. We have improved trail connectivity, lots of recreational amenities, actual places to drive and park your car for trailhead parking, bike fixing stations, a lot of different amenities that we're implementing as part of the improvements here that we're trying to basically hide within the flood system. So there's a lot of improvements around Cedar Lake, kind of partnering with Connect CR. There's a lot of amenities that we're trying to enhance Cedar Lake, make it a place that people want to come visit and promote recreation in the area. So there's a lot of existing businesses there. So that plan takes everything into account and makes this area thrive. So how do we do that? We do that using those city goals. So safety at the core, it has to work, it has to function, it has to reduce the risk of damage and loss from flooding. And reach one specifically here at Shaver Road, reducing the flood response time. So building a roadway and bridge that goes up and over the flood system reduces, one more gate closure, or actually 2 gate closures, to increase that flood response time and improve trail safety. So creating a grade separated trail crossing, pulling that bicycle user off the roadway at this type of interaction. So we do that also with economic development, not only keeping access to businesses open during times of high water, but also minimizing impacts to businesses during and after construction. And I think we focus a lot on after construction, the levee that goes in here, the flood wall that goes in here. How do we make this a positive and a win-win scenario for all the businesses in the area without imposing any kind of negative impact long term? They're going to be using it day to day in after everything's complete. So how can we make it better for them? And then an amenity, not only creating that flood system, but fixing those existing conditions that Rob highlighted earlier. We have an opportunity to improve all of that and then enhance it, right? We get to add and increase trail usage. We get to create all these new fishing opportunities. We get to add all these ADA trail connectivity items. We get to promote and actually create areas that trail users can come to and use. And then overall, not make it look like that existing McLeod Run concrete channel, right? Something that doesn't feel so quite engineered, I suppose. Keep it a little more natural feel, make it part of the area, make it feel natural. So how do we do this? How do we make all this happen? Well, we work through a handful of challenges, and the next handful of slides will dive into some of the larger ones and how we accomplish all of those goals that we just talked about through some of these larger challenges. So property owner impacts, the flood systems that come in here. I think Rob mentioned earlier, some of the bases of the levees are pretty wide, over 100 feet, and flood walls are pretty vertical, but still impose kind of a larger footprint. So we really focus on keeping businesses open through construction, hitting on that economic development portion, minimizing impacts during and after construction, and then involving property owners through the design. Property owner involvement has been kind of one of the keys to success. And Rob could tell you, I think he's had weekly standing meetings with Quaker for 8 years. So that just goes to show, the level of feedback and kind of commitment that the city's made to involve all the property owners through the whole design process. And each property owner has a different priority item, but these were kind of the 3, at least for this area, that seem to float to the top for everybody here. So how do we do and accomplish that? Well, we take tours of the businesses, kind of learn the business inside and out, find their access points, get to understand their shift schedules, their peak times, their delivery routes, everything like that, and develop a plan. So we have actually phase by phase truck turning templates to make sure they can still have access to the primary functions of their business. We create alternate access points from other roadways or back entrances into the business, just to provide that extra amenity to remove some of those impacts that they might see. You'll kind of see here in the image down below, we built the roadway, as we mentioned earlier. This roadway specifically is being raised about 12 feet or so. So we're building the majority off alignment so that the existing roadway can stay open. We created through iteration two-way traffic flow throughout construction. So you see a extension to the existing culvert here to maintain two-way traffic flow on this roadway. Maintaining secured perimeters. It's a little hard to see in this image here, but establishing that secured perimeter so that businesses can operate without that crossover between construction work and even after hours having somebody potentially get into their property. Just having that secured perimeter delineate our work. You'll see in the upper right photo here, we're taking over an existing parking lot. So we provide equal and offset parking so that businesses can still operate and function even with some of these proposed improvements. So we've kind of accomplished that through looking at that economic development portion and then still creating that basic function of the flood system has to work. So all of that's accomplished through some of this phasing. So taking a look at parking lot impacts and creating that equal offset parking prior to actually removing that parking lot so that everything can kind of function. This is kind of a busy slide, but it goes to show just the extreme amount of phasing that happens. So the lower right graphic shows all the different phases and sub-phases, all the different design teams. You can kind of see that about every corner of the design kind of touches a different aspect or design team's work. So coordinating that work was kind of key to the success. So lots of coordination with the Army Corps, great partnership there to make sure that this area functions and fits through the sequencing. And we talk about different schedules. So all the plan set volumes here are just a small sampling of all the phases and sub-phases that we had to do. But in order to keep this moving along, so to create that economic development impact minimal, accelerate construction by subdividing all of these different phases into some sort of independent utility so that we can keep the progress going forward without the entire design being complete at the same time. And then with all those sub-phasings, trying to figure out how to build that puzzle. So design limits crossover, phasing limits crossover, your contractor ingress and egress overlap. So trying to build that puzzle while taking all these things into consideration. Utility challenges throughout the construction. We are kind of in a tight area here with existing right-of-way. There's, right-of-way constraints through that construction process. The city can't acquire temporary easements for private utilities. And all of that utility agreement is tied to the existing roadway right-of-way. So making all of these relocations happen within the existing roadway right-of-way and not having to acquire all these separate private easements help accelerate construction through all of this. You'll kind of see on the right-hand side talking about building that puzzle where we are actually driving sheet piling and putting in these underground utilities, and then we put a temporary roadway over it for a later phase. So really complex staging and sequencing that we had to kind of methodically piece together with all of these phases and sub-phases. So you have constructability constraints, phasing constraints, time and space requirements with utilities, getting all the utility companies to kind of agree on timelines and when to relocate. We did some advanced utility tracking, kind of see down here at the bottom, just through start to finish. Some of these utilities actually required 2 temporary relocates, so 3 total, including that final relocation. So just shout out to the utility companies as well. They've been good to work with, just through the flexibility and progression of this design. So back to some of the phasing, through all of the different packages and lettings and different design teams and different contractors, there's a lot of things that overlap through every phase. So work in right of way, acquiring those permits from the Iowa DOT. They've been a great partner as well, but allowing these phases and different contractors to kind of phase in and phase out as the work starts and work is completed, and keeping that permit going through the entire process and not having to issue separate permitting has been a big help. The Army Corps has been leading some of the 404 permitting efforts, working with the DNR, working through some of the phases. I think we've had a handful of construction and floodplain permits that had to be sequenced based on how the construction started and kind of where we are and how it will end up. So just building that entire flood system piece by piece required a lot of coordination, both with the Army Corps and DNR. Then right-of-way acquisition, there's a lot of timing constraints, lots of legal constraints that we have to meet before we can actually proceed with the next phase. So as I mentioned earlier, just having these different phases and sub-phases kind of methodically placed into the system here very sequentially so that we can actually start construction and continue construction by creating these kind of independent utility items. And then phasing. So traffic control, there's a lot of overlap between contracts and contractors as one primary contractor completes their work, another one starts their work. So we actually had the city kind of take ownership of the traffic control for the trail detours and just made the contractors maintenance the traffic detour, and all of these different kind of phase coordination items required kind of outside the box thinking. So then we talk in or about these design refinements. So going back into the amenities portion, we created the fundamental aspect of the flood system works great. Now, to make it not feel like these amenities were just kind of pushed into the design, but through refinements, we're able to kind of create betterments, not only fixing those existing problems, but kind of creating this environment that promotes recreation and gets people excited about this area. So we kind of start with flood wall and a trail on the south side, and it kind of progresses. We start looking at some of the parking lot improvements, some trailhead improvements, and start increasing where that line of protection is on the north side. So it starts to evolve a little bit more. We start looking at impacts to businesses, and we start getting through the iteration process. So we started actually with a complete closure of Shaver Road Bridge, which then evolved into building half the bridge at a time, leaving one lane open, and realized that that just wouldn't meet that economic development checkbox. So then we created a 2-lane almost all the time throughout construction access for all these businesses, and kind of landed on, okay, now we're building the entire bridge at the same time. So refining even further, looking at the height requirements of the bridge, had to be high enough so that it wouldn't impact the tailwater, and it had to be low enough so that it didn't impact the driveway elevations. I think we focused a lot on the after construction aspect, and if the property owners had to use a 13% driveway slope every day, I'm sure they would curse us every single day they had to drive over it. So keeping all of these things into consideration for the end user, we iterated the bridge, went from a concrete pre-stressed beam bridge where we were able to kind of lengthen that bridge. Then we ultimately selected a concrete slab bridge, but then had to reduce the overall span width or span length. And that allowed us to reduce the ultimate height of the bridge, but still keep the bottom chord high enough where it wouldn't negatively impact that tailwater. So just a lot of refinements that were needed to make it feel like an actual amenity and keeping that end user in mind. So we start to refine a little bit more, start to add this defined trailhead parking, separating all the business parking from the recreational parking. I think that was kind of an important issue to make sure that there wasn't any crossover with that spaces for a business wouldn't be used, and vice versa. So creating a bike fixing station, kind of a designated parking area where people using the trail could connect to, start to refine a little bit more, and looking at the kind of long-term protection on the north side, extending the limits of the flood wall. I think originally had chosen a HESCO alignment, but then realizing that kind of a more permanent protection would be desired. Start to define the trail connections over here. And then even a little bit further. So really making sure that this is a usable amenity, taking in the trail curves appropriately, creating an opportunity where if there is high water, there's a option to get around that and still use the trail, even if the water is a little bit higher. So we start to see that through these refinements, that amenity portion really starts to shine. Like I said, promote recreation, get people excited, get people down here as part of the project. So here's the existing culvert, not too exciting, pretty, I would say, industrial area. So we look to improve it and create this more aesthetically appealing, but not overly appealing for the industrial location. We make it true to the area of which it is. So we keep a consistent aesthetic throughout the entire system. So we're looking at trail bridge improvements, very enhanced trail bridge for the users that fit within the context of the area. We talk about improving these 90-degree bends throughout the trail and eliminate all the bends, keeping those design curves such that you can, a type A bicycle rider could have fun on this trail. Looking at the very rigid engineered concrete channel, improving that with that natural feel that creates that ADA fishing amenity throughout the entire McLeod Run area, creating, pump stations that don't look like pump stations, that higher aesthetic through the area, and that kind of blends the function of a flood system within the amenities here. And Rob, if you want to talk about some of the success measures here.
Well, sure. I thought about, I could go back through the safety and the economic development and the amenities. I think Mike hit it pretty well. The story I think I would tell on this to really emphasize the point, and it might differ a little bit for those of you who watched the Bison Bridge presentation this morning. The comment was we wanted to make sure there was no taxpayer, dollars in that because nobody likes to have their taxes raised. I would say if you do this right, The city of Cedar Rapids is in the middle of a 5-year tax increase to pay for this, for its share of the flood control system. We have raised taxes 3 times our tax levy rate, 15 cents per $1,000 of valuation. And the first 3 years, not one person complained at the city council public hearing for raising taxes, not one. If you do this right, um, people get excited about it and realize that they would rather have that pay extra in their taxes than just to be walled off and not have any amenities. Um, I mean, to me, that's the conclusion right there, that we're doing this right. People getting excited what they're seeing, and I can tell you, Mike is he's a good engineer. He's working on the Interstate 80 and 380 interchange, the utility coordination there. But I probably frustrated the heck out of him with this project because we tried to design the flood wall and the bridge. It first started out with gates, like he said. But what maybe he didn't really enunciate very well is we said, scrap the design, you got to start over. We want you to lay out every one of the amenities first without regard to what the flood control component is. That's the only way it's going to look natural. And then so we kind of just started over after, I don't know, Mike, it was probably 3 to 6 months. We started over, and so I guess I just for the group here, I would say, you know, envision, start at the end, envision what you want, and then work your way backwards. And the other thing I would say, I know this has probably been at times frustrating for the design team. Uh, we at the city subscribe to the like the 5. We've all had to read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and you're probably not successful if everyone's all just getting along. There needs to be a certain amount of conflict, not not too much where people start hating each other or fighting, but that's where the good ideas come from, is from conflict and some of the frustrations. And so don't be afraid to let that conflict come in and really really chew on this some. I know there's some people on this presentation today said, I can't believe we're looking at the trails another time on this. But I think the reward is, and again, this is where you like drop the mic and say we're done. We're raising taxes and nobody's complaining. What can you say to that? So with that, I think we'll end the presentation here with a thank you again for you all. It's Engineers Week, and it's Friday afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for these guys? Feel free to type them in, say something. End of the day, Friday, nobody's going to do it. No, not even one. Come on. Somebody's got to have a question. Maybe it's all the people from the Corps that have already worked on this project here.
There you go.
There are a lot of people who are familiar with this, and I know there's some people on this who also worked on the west side. Maybe I'll just tell a quick story then and let you go. We're designing a $25 million pump station on the west side. And I said to the team, I just want you to know that the only thing they're going to ask about with the $25 million pump station and detention basin complex is, what are you doing with the skate park? And I think the response was, such is the life of an engineer. And within a week, I mean, you would not believe what hit the fan with, what do you mean you're taking our skate park out? And now we've turned into skate park engineers when we thought we were pump station designers. So that's why I wanted to thank everybody here, because it's not, most people don't just take us for granted that the flood system is going to work, and they have no clue on how much work goes into the type of things we're doing here. So they don't see the flood system, they just see a good community. So again, thank you.
Tom did put one question in there about finding the best watering hole in Cedar Rapids on a Friday afternoon, if anybody's got any thoughts on that.
Well, if you're around Cedar Lake, a lot of people like to go to the the sag wagon, which if you see all those amenities on Cedar Lake, we're planning on doing with a separate funding source. That would be a good one.
See if I can grab a location here.
Oh gosh, it's even in the
Right there.
presentation. I love it.
Special call out.
Well, this was a perfect Friday afternoon presentation then.
There you go.
All right. Well,
Team
I
building.
won't belabor the questions, I guess. So, did you guys have anything else you wanted to share? Otherwise, I'll say thanks and really appreciate you guys coming here to talk
Yeah.
and really appreciate everybody spending time with us. John told me I need to make sure I also thank Tony Jagger from who also helped out a lot with the planning of this too. So, thanks everybody for coming and have a great weekend. Happy last day of Engineers Week.
Thank you.